But off top, we're going to be talking about Harriet, like I mentioned. Brand new biographical film. It's directed by Kasi Lemmons, who is a St. Louis native. I did not know this, but I just recently found that out doing research for the show. Kasi Lemmons is a St. Louis native. She directed the film. It's written by Gregory Allen Howard and Kasi Lemmons. They co-wrote the script, starring Cynthia Erivo, Leslie Odom Jr., Joe Alwyn, and Janelle Monáe. This movie, man. We saw a trailer a long time ago. I feel like we've been waiting on it quite a while. I've heard a lot about it. I know a good amount of people who have seen it already, like prior to like the wide theatrical release.
Yeah.
And so it's already had like, I would say, a really positive word of mouth,
No, for sure.
Yeah, you look at Rotten Tomatoes, we're talking 97% from the audience. We're talking an A+ cinema score. Like, that's really, really positive stuff.
People clearly like this movie.
They do. So my expectations were quite high going into the theater to see the movie, I would say. I was certainly interested on the take and sort of the perspective that the movie would take. So I was really interested to see how it would go.
Yeah.
And we saw the movie, and we have a lot, I think, to get into in terms of the quality of the film.
There's a lot.
But then there's also a lot surrounding the film too, right?
True.
There's a lot of, I would say, controversy, for lack of a better term, about things involving the film. So let's just get right into it, man. Harriet, let's hear your thoughts, bro. What are the thoughts on this film?
Man, do we want the good or the bad first?
You know what? Let's start with the good stuff.
Let's start
positive with it.
There's a lot of things that this movie did right for me, in terms of just the exploration of such a hero in our culture, right? Specifically, the way Black people look at the history of slavery. This is like the hero. Like, to this day, besides maybe Frederick Douglass, right? This is the name that I hear the most.
Very true.
All the time. It's Harriet Tubman, Harriet Tubman, Harriet Tubman. Of course, like I said, some Frederick Douglasses in there, some Sojourner Truths in there, you know what I mean? But this is the one that we hear the most. She was about to be put on the 20.
Oh yeah.
The Tubman was
the $20 bill.
And technically it ain't over, but y'all boy Trump done pushed that back a little bit.
He put a wait list on that one. So we'll see.
But the reasons that this film works for me, right, is that it realistically depicts not just the realities of slavery, but also what it took to achieve freedom, right? And in this realm of Harriet Tubman, in her case, it was force, right? A lot of the things that Harriet Tubman did, and a lot of the ways that she kind of guided, I guess, her journey was all through force, right?
Sure.
It reclaims the history of Black women as a means of resistance by any means necessary, right? Harriet Tubman, this movie shows us that Harriet Tubman did whatever she had to do, and not just for herself, right? This is another example of Black women never being selfish, right? They always want to go back and help other people. And again, it's another thing I loved about this film. This film was probably the first time that I've seen, anybody has ever seen a Black woman in this historical context do something so amazing, and it be true and real, right. And we know this actually happened, right? Like, this ain't like, no, well, I think that no, like we
no debate, no denying it happened.
Yeah, we know this happened.
Yeah,
it's honestly just amazing. This is a movie that said that even though we can't control the circumstances to which we were born into, right, but we can control the circumstances to what we do once we get there. Totally. Once we are born.
Totally.
Yeah, that's what I really loved about the movie.
Yeah. I would certainly, I would echo, all of those things. I guess just to add on top of what you said, what I really liked in particular, that I did not expect to see, was how much of Harriet's spirituality and faith sort of led that journey. It was very much rooted in her strong belief and faith that no matter what the circumstance or the obstacle was, that she could overcome that situation. Yeah. And I really liked that they always brought it back to that throughout the film. I really appreciated that. I think particularly in slavery movies, or movies based on that time period, we haven't really seen that perspective. Yeah. And I think it provides an interesting way to sort of look at it, and I really like that, and I also appreciated that. I didn't notice this really until after we saw it, and I thought about it a little bit more, how this movie is not rated R. It's actually PG-13,
which is crazy,
right?
Yeah,
And like when you typically see movies based on slavery, they almost have to be rated R just because of the sheer brutality that takes place. You know, the things that actually did occur to people during that time. There's almost no way that you can depict that without showing, you know, the brutal aspects of it, right? Which can become very graphic. Right. But the thing that this movie does, it doesn't focus on the brutality in that sense. I think when it looks at brutality, it looks at it from a bit of a different point of view, right? Such as, you know, families being torn apart, right? Yeah. People not having their story told, losing their history. And that in itself can be, you know, brutal. That can be considered brutality.
We didn't have to see somebody get whipped for the umpteenth time.
Yeah.
And then, you know what I mean? Like, and I think that's okay.
Yeah, no, exactly. It really is. Because, like, everybody's experience during that time, though we weren't there, I think it's safe to assume it's not like a monolith. Everybody's experience is not the same, right? And so the fact that it did take this approach where it doesn't focus on physical violence as much. I really appreciated that, because also this is a movie that you could take somebody that's a little bit younger too. You know, you wouldn't take like a 7-year-old to it, but you could probably take like a 12, 13-year-old, you know, or maybe even an 11-year-old kid to see it. Like it, right. You know, for the most part, I think it's okay. Like there's some physical violence, but it isn't so much so that I feel like it takes away from the actual message of the movie or what's happening on screen. So I really appreciated that, and it didn't focus on the physical violence as much. So
for sure,
you know, those things I really liked, and I think, you know, for what it's worth, you know, we'll talk a little bit about the casting a little bit later. I do think that the cast, also part of the movie, did a really good job.
Yeah, I really do.
Yeah, I think Cynthia Erivo did a really good job. I really enjoyed Janelle Monáe and Leslie Odom Jr. I think both of them did incredible. I mean, so, you know, those are like some of the things that I think they really sort of nailed out of the park with the movie, and worked particularly well for me.
I think they also did good where how you said they didn't have to necessarily show like the brutality, right? Also think they did a good job of showing certain ideas about black women slaves in this time, right? How like also in the 19th century, where there was apparently this science they came up with, right, where it was built around this truth that the female sex thought from their uteri.
Right, yeah.
Like what?
Which,
first of all, it's insane, and not their brains. Yeah. And so, like, a lot of people didn't believe that a woman was capable of doing the things Harriet Tubman did. That's a dope idea to explore. Yeah, you know what I mean? Instantly, it's like I've in my mind, I've never seen that in any other movie.
Yeah,
it's
I mean,
like,
we don't hear about it at all.
You
really,
don't hear about
so it. Yeah.
Or even how we never talk about how Harriet Tubman was illiterate her whole life, right?
Yeah.
And even though she was illiterate her whole life, she couldn't read. That she was a brilliant thinker.
Yes.
And she understood military strategy, ecology, geography, and just honestly just civil rights law in general. She understood and knew exactly what it meant. Yeah. That's the definition of a true American hero. If you want to know what America is, Harriet Tubman.
Absolutely. I mean, that speaks to the point. Like in the movie, there's we sort of get to meet this coalition of like free black people, you know, that are they're working to, you know, free slaves and also to document their
Underground
history.
Railroad, bro.
Yeah, like that stuff I think is really powerful. Again, you know, stuff that we typically don't see in movies based on slavery, right? Like we actually sort of see a bit of the other side where, you know, these groups did exist. There were, you know, even outside of Harriet, there were other people working towards this cause, right? Yeah. And so I think overall it was a really job well done to sort of, you know, depict those things on screen. So I mean, those are a lot of good things I think about the movie. Now, what did not work quite as well? Because I know after we saw the movie, we definitely had a conversation about some things that we saw, and we were like, I don't know about that. Like, what could have been better in the movie? What didn't work for you?
Man, I this may sound nitpicky. I'm not sure, but y'all know I'm a man of music, and the score in this movie is just atrocious. It's not so like
atrocious.
So it's pretty bad. Like there's of course, there's songs associated with the movie, right? Those songs are amazing. Like, there's a couple Cynthia Erivo songs, and you know what I mean, here and there. But the timing and some of the songs they use in some scenes make zero sense to me.
Yeah, I question the timing a lot because I'm like, man, this scene did not need any music.
There'll be a scene that you'd be like, that scene would have been good if this loud ass violin wasn't playing in the background, or you know, you're just like, what is going on?
Right, and sometimes less is more.
And it happened all the time.
Yeah.
And it could have had better sound design for sure, or soundtrack.
That's a legitimate criticism, though. I mean, I don't know if people realize, like, what you do with your score and things like that is really important to the making of a movie. Like, it could really make or break a scene, you know, if you don't incorporate it at the right time, or if you don't do it properly, or if it throws off the tone of the scene that you're trying to convey. Like, music is actually super important. So, I mean, I think that's a valid, you know, criticism of the movie.
Yeah, for sure. Another thing that for me could have been better is an actual a little more realism in terms of exploring Harriet Tubman's psyche, right? Like, the person she is. I wanted to know a little bit more about who Harriet Tubman was. Like, I got some facts here and there, but I didn't get anything that I just like. I felt like I walked away from that movie knowing who Harriet Tubman was.
Sure.
It made me feel like, I don't know if is it because she's just the movie's hard to live up to that legend of Harriet Tubman.
Yeah.
I'm not sure, but it just felt a little shortchanged in that way.
Yeah. No, that's actually something, like, throughout the film, I also sort of made a note of that because, yeah, I was just thinking of other, like, biographical films that have come out, and, you know, I think some of the better ones, you really get a lens into who the individual was, and you tend to learn things that you might not have known about before.
Yeah.
And it sort of subverts your expectations a bit about the individual because you get a bit of a deeper look than any sort of textbook could tell you, any sort of, you know, Google search or Wikipedia page could tell you.
Yeah.
Didn't walk away feeling that way about this movie, right?
Yeah.
Like, I don't think I necessarily walked away knowing really any more about her as a person than I did going in. Like,
right.
I mean, I knew the broad strokes of, like, the story just based off of what they tell you in school. And I think, you know, we got a little bit of insight into the family structure and how that works, but really beyond that, not sure any more development was given to I think specific things about her, which I don't know what necessarily could have helped that. Maybe it was just a different structure of the movie. I'm not advocating that it should have been longer. I think the 2-hour time limit or the time length was fine, but I did walk away kind of feeling a little empty. Like,
yeah,
I didn't quite get much from it, or as much as I thought I would.
There's this other section of the movie of injustice they could have explored, right? Where you have Harriet Tubman, who led a battle at the Combahee River, right? And she was the first woman ever to lead an expedition that was armed, which they just throw in there, right?
Yeah, that was strange.
But it was like, that's what I want to see.
Yeah, I thought that was going to be a really big moment.
I want to see that.
And they blew right past that.
But there's like this thing where eventually she wasn't mentioned in newspapers at first, right? Like, they would do a description and say it was led by this black woman, until this black writer was like, no, this is my friend. Like, I'm putting her in this newspaper.
She gonna make it in this paper.
Yeah, she's making it in this paper. And again, at this time, around the time of where we get the Emancipation Proclamation, right? We have Abraham Lincoln, who was setting out, like, concrete spaces for black men in their recognition in military service, but there wasn't really a vision for the work of women who function in the military, who bearing arms, right? Particularly women, and definitely not black women.
Right.
And so Harriet Tubman eventually got this pension, right? But it wasn't even because she did this great thing in the Civil War. It was just because she was married to this black man after the war, and she became a widow. That's the only thing she got.
Yeah.
That was like an injustice I wish people would talk about, right? That's like something, I don't know. I feel like that's some quiet, shady shit.
Right. Well, I mean, I think that's, it kind of speaks to sort of a problem. You'll always run into these, biopics. There's only so much time and so many things that you can communicate with the length of the movie that you have, right? So it's like, what are you going to choose to document, to cover in your movie? Mm-hmm. What are you going to try to, convey to people with the time that you have? Which, I think typically like biographical films, like they almost always have such an uphill battle, because I think a lot of filmmakers take the approach of trying to tell a lot of story and cover a lot of ground, which might not be the best, way to go about it. Maybe you pick, something a little bit more specific to the person, maybe a specific event, maybe if that battle was sort of more of a focal point, mm-hmm. and we talked about the planning around that and what that looked like, and that was sort of the centerpiece of the movie, then maybe we could have had a little bit more time to explore, some of these other things in depth. But I think they tried to cover a lot in a short amount of time. And, with somebody like Harriet Tubman, who has done an inexplicable amount of work, it's almost impossible, if not just, flat out impossible.
In my mind, honestly, I wouldn't have been mad if they focused on certain things and you just give us 2 movies.
Yeah.
Just give us a sequel.
Mm-hmm.
I'd go see it. It's Harriet Tubman.
Yeah.
Who, it's Harriet Tubman.
Sure.
This ain't like your normal, I don't know, random historic figure. This is Harriet Tubman. Like, I would have been okay. I really would have.
Well, we certainly, I think, with sort of what we're talking about now, we have to talk about the controversy around the movie. We have to talk about some of the conversations that are happening, what people are talking about. I personally had people, after I saw the movie, hit me up and said to me, I refuse to see this. Like, it's cool that you saw it. What did you think? Whatever. But they personally refused to see it for numerous reasons. One of them being Cynthia Erivo. There's a couple of things, really. Yeah. There's the aspect of her being British and Nigerian, and she's playing, an African American individual. So we're talking about, the casting and the choice to not utilize an African American woman to play this role, and instead going to somebody who is not, from here. But then there's also like, we had it happen again. Somebody dug up some old tweets from her, from some things that she said a few years ago, and that's come to light. She was talking about the way people speak or something like that.
So she kind of made this joking tweet. She was talking to some friend, and she was like, something in my black girl voice.
Yeah, right. My ghetto voice.
Yeah, my ghetto voice is what she said. In my ghetto voice. She's Cynthia Erivo has been.
I'm sorry.
Yeah. She's
rough.
been doing this back and forth thing on social media, where one, she doesn't seem to recognize the difference between the lived experiences of African Americans and herself, and she also associates with a lot of people from Nigeria or West African who often also talk down on African American people, and she never disassociates herself with those people. Mm-hmm. And so we have like this balancing game going on of, she just does these things.
Yeah.
I actually have a tweet right here, right?
Uh-oh. Got a receipt.
She said, I don't think it's different to be a black girl in England than it is to be a black girl in America. We all collectively share in pain of a displacement and not feeling like we, quote unquote, belong places.
Okay, but that's just not true. Man. It's just not true.
Yep. So,
I'm sorry. Like, I think I understand the intention of why she said that.
Yeah.
I also saw an interview with her. She was on Hot 97, and she was talking about how she has experienced, racism or discrimination because she's darker, right?
Yeah.
Sure,
that's
totally.
The thing.
Yeah, like I totally that is real. That does happen, but to compare the experiences of, black women that live in a country outside of America, like, the United Kingdom or wherever, versus black women that live here. I mean, that's just, no, you really can't. especially if, again, like you mentioned, that's not a lived experience that you can actually speak to.
Right.
So how would you know something like that, right? Like,
yeah, of course, the most disrespected woman in the world is the black woman, right?
Yeah.
But their experiences are still different.
Yeah.
And it's like she doesn't understand that, especially like she always shields herself with, this like we're all black thing.
Yeah.
But she only does it when it's convenient.
Yep.
Versus when she specifies this ghetto caricature, right, that she puts on to her white counterpart on Twitter.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It was just a bad choice, right?
Yeah, and it's like, it's not even like, this isn't even about like guilt by association. It's about choices.
Yeah.
It's about the choices that you are making. You choose what company you keep and continue to keep. You choose what you don't distance yourself from or what you do distance yourself from. And you choose who and what is owed an explanation and an apology, right?
Yep.
And who and what is worthy of promoting and who is worthy of defending. And she chooses wrong a lot.
Yeah. Like consistently has, like every time I see her, either respond to a statement or she's a part of an interview, it's like, like you're not totally ignorant or anything like that. Like I'm not accusing her of that. I think she makes points, but I don't know. It's not always the most well-informed point that I think she's making sometimes in response to some of these things, right?
Yeah, so if you search the hashtag ADOS on Twitter, it is crazy. ADOS is literally an acronym for American Descendants of Slavery. And which is crazy because like half of them are about Harriet. Just as one hashtag. Wow. You can either just type in Cynthia Erivo, Harriet, or again, hashtag ADOS, and you're going to see a lot of tweets from some angry people about this woman.
Yeah, it's a lot going out there. The other, sort of controversy surrounding this movie. I mean, I can't even classify this as a spoiler per se because it is all over the internet. People have been talking about it, and it's not. I don't think it's been hidden either. It might be a part of the trailers, but in the movie, the main or one of the main, I'll say one of the main antagonists.
That's important.
Is a black bounty hunter.
Also known as slave catchers at this time.
Interesting choice. That one of the main antagonists is a black bounty hunter. This is also a fictional character created for the intentions of this movie, according to a lot of people. That this is not actually somebody that knew Harriet or existed in this time or as a part of the story.
In her story, probably not.
Right. And that's not to say that black bounty hunters or slave catchers didn't exist.
Which they did.
They did exist. There is like, stories and testimonies about that. But for this particular story, it seems as if this specific character was created, which got a lot of people tight. It got a lot of people tight because it's like, okay, we finally have a movie about Harriet Tubman, one of the most legendary and iconic black historical figures ever, and we're going to tell her story through a movie, and we're going to use, the sins of slavery, which obviously was created and manufactured by white men and women at that time. Right. However, in this movie, one of the main villains is going to be a black bounty hunter. Understandably, if you ask me, that got a lot of people upset.
Yeah,
right?
it did.
Because you're talking about like the historical accuracy or inaccuracy of like what's going on at that time, and also the perception.
So I guess it's one of those conflicting things in my mind, only because, so of course we know it didn't happen in Harriet's story, but we do know that is very potential that, again, these black slave catchers did exist, right? Here's this quote from Joshua Rothman, who is the chair of the University of Alabama History Department, who said there were surely black slave catchers. It would be tricky for such people to operate in the South itself because in most parts of the South, whites assumed all black people that they didn't know were slaves, and there are plenty of cases of free people taken into custody, thrown in jail, and sold as slaves themselves. But outside of the South, or even in border states, we know that rings of kidnappers used to free black people to lure in their prey, who were far more likely to trust a black person than a white person, and who wouldn't realize that they'd been duped until they were en route to being sold as a slave. And no doubt there were free black people who just decided to do the work themselves and keep all the reward money. So this happened a lot in the South, which we see she wasn't that far in the South though, right? No, which is again is a small historical inaccuracy, right? Like if she was deeper, farther south, this would make so much more sense, right? But because we know she wasn't that deep south, it's still like right? It's like they were trying to just show people that these people did exist, but maybe they just did the wrong movie, right?
Yeah.
Like maybe it's just the wrong time, and
yeah, it's like I don't know if this story is what needed that, right?
Exactly.
Especially like in the movie. I mean, it's an interesting choice. Even how that black bounty hunter, how his story plays out, like in the movie, like it's just it was interesting, and I think it sort of left me scratching my head afterwards. Like you mentioned, they did exist. This is something that has been proven, but it is all about like time and place and like where does it make sense to include that. And sort of
although
thing.
I don't agree with it, I will say people are definitely overreacting.
Yeah.
I will, because...
Well, I mean, with anything these days, right, there's typically overreaction.
It is insane. Because the message behind the movie is more powerful than the controversy of the film to me, right?
Yeah.
Like, there were... my favorite part of the movie... Well, you know what I mean? I mean, people can say Cynthia Erivo this or black man slave catcher that, but it was really like the claps and the tears from the other black women in the crowd that I seen in the theater that really made this movie worth it to me. Like, you could be mad at all the controversy in the world, but to be able to convey and understand that emotion with the other people in that theater was way more powerful to me. Like, that you have to be there, right? That's the only thing. That's how I can explain it.
Yeah. By the end of it, I mean, it is a moving experience to sort of, sit through and see unfold. So
there was snapping and clapping.
Yeah, it was all of that. So I think, as a film, like it is important, and I think it's going to do more good than harm ultimately. And I think it's important that, we finally have something for Harriet Tubman, since she's so talked about and has been the most talked about when it comes to like black historical figures. So, and I mean, over the weekend it made $12 million opening weekend, which surpassed expectations.
It's doing amazing.
It's doing really well, and the budget was 17. So I mean, it's doing good, and it's like holiday season. I think more and more people are gonna go see it. Like Thanksgiving is approaching, Christmas is approaching, so I think more people will sort of go out to see the movie. So I mean, I think that's a good thing. I do like there are things here and there that you can obviously point out as being like, okay, maybe this wasn't the best choice to make, right? But it's not perfect. It is not perfect.
It's not.
I wouldn't expect it to be, but I do think that it is ultimately something that's beneficial for people to experience and see and also talk about, right? Like we can also debate these things as well as love them and enjoy them. So all of that's like really important to remember about this experience.
Shout out to Janelle Monáe.
100%. Always.
Die.
Forever and always. Ooh, well, we spent a lot of time talking about Harriet. There was a lot to unpack, so we kind of we really had to dive deep into that. If you have not seen the movie, you should go check it out so you can dive into the conversation. Let us know your thoughts on Harriet.